I feel like I have a huge burden taken away from around my neck. I don't know why, but I feel a lot lighter. And on to chapter 11. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail about the creature and his life after leaving Frankenstein, but of course there are some salient points that I want to make out. One is that he runs away from the boarding house where he was born and somehow covers himself with clothes. And this is chapter 11 in the second paragraph in the chapter that he says this, that I had covered myself with some clothes. Why? How would he have known? Or was this just a plot device so he's not wandering around naked outside? And he sees the moon rise for the first time, and he doesn't know what it is, and he describes that. Now, it's also interesting that in his stay in the forest, he eats berries and nuts and roots. He doesn't kill animals and eat them. The creature is a vegetarian. And that might strike some of us as being very strange in light of the fact that he later kills William and Justine and a couple of other people that I won't go into now, so I won't spoil it, even though I think you probably read it. But he is a vegetarian. He does not kill animals to eat them. And then you get another sense of the duality when he's talking about his first experience with fire. And again, this is in chapter 11, he says. He found some a fire that had been left by some beggars, and he said, and he felt the warmth, and he said, in my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, but quickly drew it out with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause should produce such opposite effects. So it goes back to that duality theme of fire good, but fire bad. And of course, in the original movie in the 1930s, you had that exemplified by a scene that didn't happen in the book, where the creature comes in contact with fire when he is in the hut of the old hermit. But again, that repeated theme of duality, how something is both good and bad, as are humans. He continues on and runs into people for the first time. I don't know how he got out of the streets of Ingolstadt without coming into contact with people, but apparently he managed to avoid them. And he finds out that he's not welcome and continues on, and then finally comes into the lean-to by the French family. Now, I do want to ask a probing question here. The creature's wandering about. He obviously has some thoughts, but he has no language. Can you have thoughts without language? And this is an old argument, an old quandary, is that we think in thoughts. So without speech, do we merely act and react according to stimuli? And if the creature is doing that, then how can he formulate thoughts? Think about that. But at any rate, he gets into the lean-to, and he can see into the cabin, and where he can see Felix, and for some reason the girl's name is escaping me at the moment, even though I have the book before me. But there is a sense of duality when he's talking about seeing the old man and the girl. He raised her and smiled with such kindness and affection that I felt sensations of a peculiar and overpowering nature. They were a mixture of pain and pleasure. So again, the duality. And he said he had never experienced them before. He had felt hunger, he had felt cold, he felt pain when he stuck his hand in the fire, and I'm sure that he felt fear when the other people rejected him. But he had not been exposed to love and or affection before. And so he settles down in this lean-to, and begins to observe a true family. And as he watches them, he begins to understand what they are saying, and he begins to understand language. And cognitive behaviorists would say at this point, he begins to understand much more. And he doesn't understand that he's different from them at first. He doesn't approach them, perhaps because of the fear that he still was held over from meeting the villagers who chased him away, but because he doesn't approach them. But then later in the chapter, he says, and it's all about page and a half from the M, I admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions. But how was I terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool. At first I started back, unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror. And when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. Until he saw himself in the pool, he didn't understand how he was different from the other creatures, humans, whom he had met, and now he understands it. Now, I talked about allusions. This is an allusion to Paradise Lost, when Eve catches sight of herself in a pond for the first time. But instead of being repulsed by what she sees, she looks at herself and she thinks, oh, wow, I'm really, really pretty. Whereas the creature looks upon himself and understands, I am ugly. So though he and Eve have some things in common, their outward appearance is certainly not one.